down to business.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Had a little bit of technical difficulties at the start. I noticed that a couple of the streams were hitching a little bit. Don't know if that's on my end or if it's happening everywhere. I'm hoping that it's not happening everywhere. But anyway. So this week, had a couple things, a couple opportunities that, definitely had some fun this week. One of which was a game we played tonight, that my kids, had encouraged us to try. And, that game is technically it's called Spike Ball. Let me show you what that looks like here. And so basically, it's kind of a cross between volleyball and foursquare, I guess they describe it that way. But anyway, so, had a little bit of a blast after dinner. And, so it was kind of fun. Definitely we'll have to break it out again. We've enjoyed the weather. We've been enjoying the sunshine. So anyway, that's pretty much kind of what we started with tonight. After dinner, my daughter had made us enchiladas. It was really good. Very proud of her for her skills that she has undertaken from that standpoint. And so anyway, we had some fun. I am going to debut something tonight that I think all of you are going to enjoy. But of course, it's going to be one of those things where you're going to have to join in on the fun, I guess, with it. Now, I'm not quite sure if it's something that I'm going to continue with for the duration. It's just something that I'm going to try. We'll see how well it works out. But anyway, yeah, I guess we'll just give that a shot and we'll give it a try. And we'll see how you guys like it. So anyway, so I was sitting in a video call this week. And one of the things that caught my eye, of course, is with everybody being at home, and working from home. Nobody got really fancy with the backgrounds and that kind of stuff. Not a problem. Totally understand. But I went ahead and got a nice shirt on and, took the shower, got my hair all done and that kind of thing. And then of course, obviously put up my background set and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I found very interesting was the fact that, a lot of these people were in just like t-shirts and, that kind of stuff. And so it got me to thinking. I also was thinking as well in regards to things like the way that we communicate in terms of our speech patterns and that type of stuff. And so for tonight's show, I kind of wanted to bring up the whole process or the whole thought process of not necessarily stereotyping in the bad way, but more of when you look at somebody or when you are talking to somebody, you create impressions of who you're looking at. And you do this basically by, you look at people in a certain way, the way that they speak, the way that they act, some of the things that they say and do, those kinds of things are one of the things that I think that we as a people naturally do. we naturally come up with things like first impressions, second impressions, those kinds of things. And one of the things that I think that I really appreciate is things like, when you're speaking with somebody, not necessarily that they have a large vocabulary, but that they try and avoid using expletives to explain themselves. It's something that I appreciate. It's something that I work on and try really hard to do, to keep myself from using those words, because even though I grew up in the generation of comedians like Andrew Dice Clay and, Eddie Murphy, the Eddie Murphy Raw album, Richard Pryor. I can think of some other people like Bob Saget and that kind of stuff. But even with some of my comedians, I don't really get into the use of expletives within speech. And so I was thinking about that, and I was kind of wondering, what kinds of things you folks have dealt with in the past, whether it's directed towards you or certain things that you do for other people. And just how we approach the methodology by which we look at and appreciate not only the people that we're dealing with, but also, do we as a nature jump to conclusions, jump to certain bad things like stereotypes and that kind of stuff, whether they're positive or negative. I mean, they're still stereotypical. You would expect, certain people to act a certain way, potentially just based on some of the things that you have experienced, witnessed, the way television portrays these types of people, doctors, things of that nature. So from that standpoint, I kind of was thinking about things like, first impressions, second impressions. What are some of the things that you look at when you're dealing with someone, when you're looking at someone, when you first approach them? What are some of the things that you think about when you first get with these people, when you first encounter these people? And not necessarily that it's bad. It doesn't have to be bad. First impressions are often wrong, we've been shown. So understanding that, and just understanding impressions and how you view people with certain ways. Because, I mean, everybody talks about like the bikers. When a biker walks in all leather and they're dirty from the road, I mean, there's kind of a thought process that they're tough guys and that kind of stuff. And they're supposed to be, really, really tough and really, really strong, really, really mean. And they're going to be rude and insensitive and that kind of stuff. So from that standpoint, what types of stereotypes and what things have been associated to you? Because, I'm going to tell you a little personal story. I actually got called out for something that I said. It was taken out of context. But because of my skin color, I ended up getting a reverse racial stereotype. And I did get in trouble at work. I mean, things were not quite the best way to deal with it. But unfortunately, the person decided that just because I said this, even though I said it in context with a conversation with a third party, that individual, relayed that information, and then I got nailed with a stereotype. And it didn't really feel all that great to me because it was a negative connotation. Even today, I'm sure people have their feelings in how they view me and how they view, the way that I speak, the way that I dress, these kinds of things, whether I'm heavy or not heavy, whether I'm in shape, not in shape, my hair is long, my hair is short, but whatever it is, these kinds of things from a stereotypical point of view. So, in terms of that, and to try and take this to a new level, I promised you that there'd be something new for tonight, and I'm going to give it a try. So I want you to go easy on me. This is a first time for me. In fact, give me just a second, and I'm gonna try. I forgot to completely set it up here. Just give me just a moment to get this going, because I went and forgot to do this. Oh, shoot. But while I'm doing that, just think about what you've got going on in your life. And now, of course, it doesn't want to do this. So let me try this. Here we go. All right, that looks better. So now, let me do this.
Thank you for calling Whiskey Musing.
Okay, so
welcome, host.
So I'm sure that you're
manage your callers from the call-in studio.
You're hearing some of that, and so let me go ahead and just pop this on. I actually now have a call-in number. So if you'd like to join the call or join the conversation here and talk with me over the phone, feel free to go ahead and use that number. And now it's only a test run. I am not planning on using. I don't know if I'm going to continue using this or not. It sort of depends on how much activity it gets. But I wanted to offer that as an opportunity rather than just going through chat lines and things of that nature. So if you feel inclined, I have 3 lines available, and you can give a call. But until I start getting some calls in, just some different things about stereotypes and that kind of stuff. Sitting there and discussing things with people. It used to be in the past that expletives were something that were not used all the time. And these types of things, in terms of your speech and in terms of your conversation with people, throwing in expletives on a regular basis was something that was sort of frowned upon, at least, with my growing up. So from that standpoint, today, though, I'm listening to other people. I do have work in the construction trades somewhat. And so being as a part of the construction trades, they tend to use expletives on a regular basis. And so from that standpoint, it's not bad, and please don't take it as that. It's not that I'm looking down on these people for this, but it's a pattern. It's a habit. And to me, if you're going to use that habit, and get into that habit of doing those types of things, of using expletives and that type of stuff, you kind of are, in a way, you're setting yourself up for a certain level of thought process from the people that you're speaking to. And I've tried to explain this to my son in the past, and it all has to deal with how you feel like you should be or how you want to be viewed by other people. And I'm not saying that people who use expletives are, definitely in the bad side of things. I don't want you to get that impression. I don't want you to think that. However, the use of expletives, at least when I was growing up, was something that was very frowned upon, that you should be able to express yourself verbally without having to use those expletives. And at the same time, back in the 80s, you had a lot of comics who find using those expletives on a regular basis as it being funny. And so you would have things like Eddie Murphy's Raw and, even some people that you would think would be wholesome and good because of their image on, say, America's Funniest Home Videos and Full House. Bob Saget's stand-up comedy is actually pretty raunchy. At least it was the last time that I saw it. So, maybe he's cleaned up his act, but I actually appreciate comedy and comedians who can do their shows without a bunch of expletives thrown in. And it's just the way that I perceive myself, where I don't want to be a part of those kinds of things, with the expletives. So from that standpoint, for a stereotype, in terms of my mind, it's not that I necessarily look down upon those people who use those expletives. There are times when you should, there are times when it is acceptable to do so. But it seems like today, there are a lot of people who are utilizing expletives as part of daily speech pattern, and so I question and I wonder what that is going to do within our English language. At what point do we go and change the English language such that those words become so commonplace that it's just acceptable speech patterns? And so anyway, looks like I have. Well, let me see. So it looked like somebody tried calling in, but they ended up dropping for some reason. Maybe a bad connection or something along those lines. So anyway, to get back to my point, as far as like the expletive parts, using certain types of language, and you don't need to have a really big vocabulary in order to express yourself appropriately. I personally feel like we have gone to the point where using those expletives on a regular basis are basically becoming so commonplace that we have no other place to go, realistically, in order to express ourselves the way that the expletives were supposed to be utilized. Meaning, when you hurt yourself and you say those expletives, you tend to kind of like grow numb to them. And so I'm really trying to see where and wonder where the use of this type of language gets tossed in. Now I spent a little bit of time over in England, and the funny thing about it is in England, they actually use those expletives, but they also have other expletives as well. And so some of the words that they use would tend to be a little more offensive to us here in the States. So I see I have a caller now. Let me go ahead and get this going. Might help if I can actually type. And let me just do this. And here we go. Let's see if this works. Come on. Oh, it's taking a second. Okay, there we go. Hello, caller. Joan, you're on the air. Can you hear me? Joan, can you hear me? Not quite sure.
Hello, Rick.
Oh, there you are. You can hear me now. Hello?
Hello there, Rick.
Hello there. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. You're in an echo.
Oh, there's a bit of an echo? My apologies. Don't know why there would be an echo. How about that?
That's fine.
Okay. So, what was it that you wanted to say? I think I lost.
Yes?
Yeah, so what you mentioned,
Hello?
you were wondering what the effect I'm trying to
I sure
create
can.
by using the expletive. So go ahead and expound upon that. You there?
Well, when I was growing up, it was a situation that you used expletives as you're talking about.
Right. Oh my goodness. I do hear that echo. That is not good. I apologize for that.
When I was growing up, you use that for, I can't think of the word at the moment. But I was taught that
You were taught that?
So what effect are you trying to create when you use them as compared to using proper English, say?
Oh, absolutely. That is definitely a good question. And I think that's what essentially kind of along the lines of my point in terms of at what point do we utilize that expletive and do we utilize something else instead and what that word is going to be, because obviously if you're using that expletive, it tends to be something that you should be using to enhance the speech, not necessarily be the speech, I guess, is if you sort of understand my point. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, Joan. I couldn't hear your last, so obviously there's a bit of a lag or a delay here. So anyway, I apologize for that, but so yeah, I mean, in terms of the younger generation, and using expletives on a regular basis, it becomes questionable, I think, from the standpoint of at what point do you utilize a different word, and what are those words going to be? What are those types of words going to be? And I'm looking at the chat window here. Yes, Ken, getting out of the habit of expletives is difficult. I tend to look at it as sort of it becomes a habit, and when it becomes a habit, it becomes it's like smoking. I mean, it's not addictive in a certain sense, but because it's a habit, it is very difficult to cut that out. And that's true. That is very true. You've got an excellent point. To be honest with you, I don't even really know how someone who isn't already going down that path in not using those words would be able to break the habit, because it's a psychological type of a thing. From that standpoint. And it doesn't even have to be an expletive. I mean, it could be just something that a word you can't find the correct adjective for. And so you go ahead and utilize the same word or utilize a different word for many different things. And it's up to interpretation to truly understand what you are trying to convey as a part of the communication. So it doesn't even have to be an expletive. I'm kind of centering around expletives only because it's something that is forefront to my mind. But it's beyond that. It's just being able to express yourself utilizing the English language in an appropriate fashion to be able to expand upon your thoughts, to make yourself understood. And I think communication from that standpoint is sometimes difficult for some people who may not have a large vocabulary, and so unfortunately, some words are going to come across having the same types of meanings, some types of meanings in that there are going to be times where the word that you're looking to try and find and grasp and be able to utilize, it might not even be there because of the lack of a an appropriate adjective or verb or something along those lines. So expletives, I think, are also used in the way of pauses. Another word that absolutely drives me up the wall. So one habit that my children have that I tend to try to work them out of is the word like. So like, I like, like she really like this, like that. That, honestly, that drives me up a wall. That really does. And mainly it's because of the fact that I can't follow that conversation very well when you're utilizing those same words. And I understand it's the purpose behind it is sort of like my pauses with my attempt to find the words that I want to use to be able to express myself appropriately. Utilizing all of those words and utilizing specific words over and over and over again, stammering, those types of things, they are verbal pauses. They cause you to think about what it is that you want to say. What type of word are you searching for? And I'm finding as I'm getting older, I'm adding more and more of these into the frustration of the people around me, sometimes because I'm not able to express myself appropriately. That being said, I do tend to try and speak as properly as I can from an American point of view, because obviously if you go over to England, they believe proper English is something different than what we have over here. That being said, understanding what it is that you are attempting to say and convey, because it is just as important for the listener to understand the message that you've got going out as it is for the person communicating the message to get it across properly. And being able to communicate that in such a way so that both sender and receiver come to an agreement upon which they can understand each other. And it's very difficult to do if the language isn't your native language, but it's also very difficult to do in certain cases, even with the native language being the same, just because of the usage of the words and the attempt in trying to get it across. I mean, it's just like text speak. Text speak to me is completely foreign. It's not uncommon for me to go and reach out to my kids to explain to me what this, 3-letter acronym or whatever text speak means. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is to try and make an attempt to express yourself better than what you currently do, to find different ways to maybe work your way out of that mold, whether it's expletives or whether it's a certain word that you're commonly using. Attempting to get better is the key here. Get better at what you are doing in order to pass along and expound upon what it is that you've got going on and what you're trying to convey, the communication that you're trying to get out. So that to me is a really big thing. And again, going back to the whole stereotype or the whole first impression kind of idea, the more that you can change that first impression for someone, the better off you're going to be. I mean, I find that my first impressions, even when I first get them, my first impressions are usually off. And so I have tried really, really hard in my dealings with other people to wait before I get an impression, to attempt to find a much more lengthy time so that I don't get caught into that whole stereotypical idea of, oh, well, this person, I dismiss them right away. As soon as they come into, doing something that I may not like or whatever, or even something that I don't understand. So, trying to work around that, trying to work around that idea that, first impressions can be changed. Second impressions can be changed. We can all change. And, however, it's how you want to be perceived is really the key here. Because to be honest with you, I mean, my opinion of you shouldn't necessarily affect you unless it's important to you that my opinion counts. Most of the people that we deal with on a regular basis likely are such that we are not able to communicate effectively. Sorry, I'm watching down here and I'm seeing something has gone wrong with my side of what I'm tracking. I'm hoping that it's not failing on your guys' end. This is really strange. Here I am. I'm a wireless engineer, and I can't seem to keep things going on my end. Anyway, so it looks like it was just my side, hopefully. So as we move forward, and we try to move ahead in our own dealings with other people, let's try to communicate a little more effectively. Let's attempt to try something different. Again, this so far, everything with COVID and all that, I've been encouraging you to try something new, try something different. And I think that this time gives us that opportunity. It gives us the ability to consider ourselves in a new way, in a new fashion, and be able to expound upon what it is that we are looking to create within ourselves and within our lives. And certain things like, our approach to our children. Obviously our children are around us a lot more. So this is something where we might be able to change, might be able to do something different. And being able to express ourselves appropriately, I think is a good start. It really is. It actually is a good start. So, consider that. And again, all three lines open here. I mean, if you guys, please feel free to call in. This is granted, I understand it's a test. I'm hoping that last call with Joan was not bad, but anyway. And of course, the whole point of the program is the whiskey musing. So whiskey. So anyway, I mean, as far as language is concerned, even the way that you dress, even the way that we act, these are all things that can change the perception from ourselves to somebody else. And realistically, it may not even be something that someone that is a negative. It could be a positive too. Could very well be a positive. Okay, so we have another caller. I'm going to bring them in here. Just let me get this going. And let me see where I am. And here we go. Hello, Kirk. You are now on the air.
Hey, Rick.
How are you?
How's it going? Oh, 3K is awesome. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Whoops. I'm sorry. Here, let me correct that while I get the opportunity here. I was in a hurry, so I apologize. There you go. Now it's all on there. All right. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Well, welcome to the program.
Thanks. One thing I have worked hard on is actually not swearing, at least out in public.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I'm by myself, I will intentionally say, basically euphemisms, son of a monkey, instead of the other obvious one.
That's true. That is true. I've noticed some people do that. I know we try to do that here at home with certain people, and to make sure that our kids don't pick up on that that type of language to carry over. But you're right. Go ahead and add that additional expletive substitution in there, and that's actually a good point to be able to carry that through.
And that has helped me when I was out on a job. I'm in someone's house and their kids were around, and I messed something up, and without even thinking about it, I said, "Son of a monkey."
And how did they react to that?
That's why I do it. Oh, they had no issues whatsoever because I didn't actually swear.
Oh, okay.
So, but that's why it's like everything I do in electrical, you do it in a certain order, no matter what, just so when you're working on it live, you're always safe. It's the same kind of mentality. I do it even when I'm by myself to make sure that I do it correctly when it matters.
Oh, absolutely. And being in the trade that I'm in, I actually shift. I've been to several different sites. I've been to locations that have been, distribution houses. I've been to manufacturing plants. And then the next day I could be in a high-rise office building or something. So I'm right there with you. If you're going to do it, you got to do it the same way every single time, because that one time you may forget where you are and you could slip. That's an excellent point. Excellent point.
And on a side note, I really like the Doctor Strange vibe we got going.
Doctor Strange. Oh, yes.
The hair.
Yeah, no, I know. It's turned gray more and more over the course of the last couple of years, but yeah, no, it's like I said, hey, with the first episode, I said I'm going to grow my hair out. This is something that I wanted to try and do. I've never done it before, so I appreciate the support and definitely the enthusiasm. I just don't know how gray it's actually going to get over time, but we'll see. So anyway, anything else that you wanted to say?
Okay. Nope, that was all I had.
And that was it. Okay. Well, excellent. All right. Well, you go ahead and you have yourself a wonderful evening, and thank you for joining the program.
Yeah, bye.
All right. Bye now. All right. So that, of course, opens up another line. Having three of them. So anyway, definitely, you definitely want to be able to utilize, especially if you're in a position where you need to be able to use the same type of language across the board, no matter where you are, because sometimes you can be in sensitive areas. And so that definitely is a potential issue if you continually use essentially foul language. Now, don't get me wrong. There's always a place for foul language. It's just you need to gauge the appropriateness, in my opinion, for the particular crowd that you're in. And so if you tend to lean that way on a regular basis, it's not necessarily that you're going to have a bad viewpoint, but it might not be the perspective that you're looking to convey to the audience surrounding you. It might be something that you might want to do, or you might want to say things or do things in a different fashion based on the audience that are around you. And unfortunately, when we tend to do these things on a regular basis, we tend to forget sometimes when we are in specific surroundings. And so we make mistakes. And sometimes it's a little difficult to go back from an apology. It's a lot better not to have made the mistake in the first place than it is to apologize and try to correct it down the road. So anyway, any other thoughts? I've noticed a couple changes hard but healthy. It is definitely change is definitely hard in some cases. I mean, just as an example, I used to bite my fingernails when I was a kid. My mother can attest to that, and I mean it was pretty bad. But from my perspective, it's taken me, pretty close to 40 years but I've been able to work myself out of it. Having habits is really difficult sometimes, depending upon the habit that you have. Hopefully they're not really bad habits, but occasionally they might be. They might be some kind of negative habit that we definitely have challenges with. So, so that's kind of the thought. Phone lines are open. Give us a call. Let's talk a little bit about this this topic that we've got going on right now in terms of change and language and dress. I mean, dress is another thing. I had a roommate one time, come to think about it, and he dressed very formal on a regular basis. And I asked him one time, I said, why don't you dress down sometimes? I mean, why do you always wear the suit? And he used to wear the hat and the tie and that type of stuff. And he told me that his father told him that you want to dress the way you want people to perceive you. And so if you're constantly walking around and keep in mind, this is 30 years ago, roughly, maybe a little bit more than that, or a little less than that, sorry. But 15, 20 years ago, maybe, but, you always want to dress for the impression that you're trying to go for, rather than the impression that, people are going to get just from what you're wearing. So for him, he was always dressed up really, really dapper. And I think that actually was kind of an interesting thought. And I never really thought about it back then, because frankly, I didn't care at that point. But as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that there are times where you want to create a certain impression and a certain perspective. Being in a professional format for my day job, I definitely want to create a professional appearance. Now, yes, growing my hair is not going to be professional necessarily, but from that standpoint, I am taking the risk. I understand the risk, and therefore I am prepared for any type of change in someone's perception of me based on my appearance. I'm definitely not going to change my speech in any way. I'm not going to change who I am per se, but understanding that perceptions and people's perceptions of other people based on appearance and speaking habits and those kinds of things can change the interactions from those people. I mean, the same thing kind of goes with, religious affiliations. Sometimes it can be a negative connotation and not necessarily a positive one. And so this is something that I think that as humans, we need to understand that, first of all, there are so many different viewpoints. There are so many different angles with which to approach a problem or approach a scenario. And a lot of times it is about perspective as to what the approach actually is to any given related scenario. And therefore, from that standpoint, just because I look at it from one way doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Necessarily, I may believe it is, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. And so we need to be able to keep an open mind about different things, about the person that we're dealing with, because you might be surprised. They may speak in a certain way just because, again, it's due to habit, or they might be dressed a certain way because of comfort. Could very well be due to comfort. It could be maybe they just don't have the ability throughout their daily job to wear, nice clothes. They don't want to ruin them, those kinds of things. But there's almost always a reason as to why they are doing the things that they do. And if we open our mindset and allow ourselves to look beyond one particular aspect and one particular perception to find out what the real person is behind, I think that's going to help us in the long run. And like I said, I mean, first impressions, you get first impressions quick. I know I do, and I try really hard to not do that. I tend to take a thoughtful approach and a little bit longer time to get to know the person a little more, so that maybe I can understand what the perspective is of that person, and maybe to understand what angle they're coming at any given scenario, in order to understand a little bit more about that individual. So anyway, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, try something new. Try to change your speech pattern. I mean, think about it not so much as yourself, but also think about it from from another person's viewpoint. Look at it from another person's perspective, if you will, and try to understand certain things about yourself. And this is a way for self-discovery. This is a way for self-change, self-understanding. And again, I'm certainly the first to admit I'm not always right. More often than not, I am, but I'm not always right. Okay. I think the last time I was wrong. Let's see. 1985, maybe? No, it was that MacGyver look, the mullet look. That's what it was. Anyway, no, I kid. I'm serious. I kid. I mean, I'm human just like everybody else. And we all have our faults. We all have our habits. We all have our perspectives on things. And, therefore I can appreciate, someone's perspective on stuff, someone's angle, someone's thoughts. I can appreciate that. Having a closed mind, though, I think is just as much of a negative as getting that first impression and not changing it, because that is what a closed mind is. So, from that perspective and that angle, that viewpoint, we should try to open ourselves up to different ways about the world, because we're not always the right way. We're not always on the right angle. There's a lot more to this world than just having one viewpoint and sticking to it. So anyway, let's see. What are we looking at? Yeah, we're looking at about 10 minutes or 12 minutes left. So, I see a chat. Someone mentioned that most Christians have the most closed minds. I often wonder about that. Because there are certain religions where, and there are certain ways of thinking that tend to close our minds off. And like I said before, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do things. There's a lot of different ways to go places and to do stuff. Now, from my perspective on that, on religion by itself, I look at it as simply this. I believe the way I believe. You believe the way you believe. You and I may not come to an agreement as to how to believe, but as long as you don't attempt to change my mind and I don't attempt to change yours, then there's no reason why the two of us can't just get along together. We disagree on that point, whatever that point might be, but being able to come to a consensus on the fact that we can agree to disagree. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we've lost that as a society, the ability to agree to disagree. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't necessarily mean that I'm necessarily a bad person, or, because you don't agree with me doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad person. Because ultimately, if you think about it, I mean, in terms of like the Christian religion, you believe that you're going to heaven and you're going to go see God and be judged. And so to sit here and to say that, the way that I believe is the only way to go, maybe it isn't. We don't know. That's the thing. We really ultimately at the end of the day, and I hate that phrase for other reasons, but at the end of everything, there is no way to know until you get to that point. So from that standpoint, being able to understand that there are other viewpoints, there are other ways of thinking, that you don't necessarily have to overwhelm everybody for that, I think, and take over the world per se. I think is really a good point. I think that a lot of people need to sort of embrace that. Now, that being said, if I were to come and ask you, for an example, about your religion and wanting to really learn, then absolutely, by all means, open up, feel free to explain it to me, take it however you want, from that standpoint, because I am looking for information. But if I've already told you no, I'm not interested, then respect that. And that goes for anything. I mean, that's not just religion, it's politics, it's all kinds of things. If we as a people, we've kind of lost the ability to respect the word no. And so, from that standpoint, again, it goes back to the whole perception issue. I mean, I may not want to be a part of what it is that you believe in, but that doesn't necessarily make me a bad person for it, per se. At the same time, though, you also have, some people who are on the extremes, either extreme one way or the other, left, right, up, down, whatever you want to call it. And there are certain things where certain philosophies in life that tend to be on the extreme and probably should not exist, but they do. And again, it goes all back to that whole point of whether or not it affects me or whether or not what you're doing is affecting others who don't believe that same way. I'm kind of in the camp of live and let live. I'm certainly not going to try and change your viewpoint unless you ask, and we're in a conversation. And if I'm trying to prove a point, that's one thing. We're in a discussion. We've entered into that discussion hopefully with an open mind to be able to listen to one another. Sometimes that breaks down into arguments, but the key here is to understand that at the end of that discussion, if neither one of us is budging, there's no reason why either one of us is necessarily in the wrong per se. To carry it forward. We just need to agree that we disagree and that neither one of us is going to budge. And therefore, we just go on about our merry way. Now, whether or not that's together as friends or whether or not, we can be acquaintances or whether or not we absolutely hate each other, that's entirely up to the two individuals in the discussion. But to disagree is possible. It is possible to be on different sides of the issue and just agree to disagree and respect each other for it and move on. It's just like I respect other people, like to start off the conversation when I was speaking about, patterns of speech and ways of look. I respect the way that people look. I respect the way that people speak. It's not my way, but I respect them for it. But it's not always a bad idea to necessarily change our habits, change the way that we think, change the way that we talk, change the way that we look. It's not wrong to do that. I mean, if anything is really constant in this life, it is change. And so being able to do that type of thing, I think is definitely healthy. It's definitely something that we should all embrace. We should all embrace doing something different and new. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. You go back to your old way. It's no big deal. It's not that big of a deal. Try something different, try something new, and, change your way of thinking a little bit, change the way, you approach things a little differently. And again, I mean, we may not always agree, but that doesn't mean that we can't at least respect one another at the end of it all and continue upon with our lives. So anyway, I guess that's pretty much about all that I have really to say. I thank everybody who participated in the phone calls. I thank everybody who participated on the program here. And basically, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening. And by the way, I'm trying to make this expand. So as I noted in a post, whether it was on Facebook or whether it was on Twitter, I am attempting to expand this. So please, if you appreciate what I'm doing here, if you appreciate what I'm talking about, check out the other videos. They are saved on YouTube. And so if that's the case, if you like what I'm doing and like that, like the format, like the way that some of the discussions and topics that I'm talking about, please feel free to send out the message to all of your friends, to other people. Do me a favor and help me advertise. Make this a little bit bigger than just me. I will say that I would appreciate if you point them to the YouTube side of the house, because right now I am Facebook Live on my personal account. I don't necessarily want that. In fact, I've been considering switching it over to just like a public page. It is a little difficulty from my perspective. There's some difficulty with doing that, and I'm trying to work through those. But if you like what I'm doing, you like what I'm talking about, pass it along. Let's expand this. I really would appreciate it. And anyway, so I think that's pretty much about it. I want to thank you for joining, like I said, and we'll see you next week.